and then we'll get to the main event, which is Matt O'Brien's session. So that's just prompting me that it's kick-started. So we have begun the recording. So welcome everyone to the Power BI and Data Analytics for Enviro's Meetup group. We try and meet once a month, just virtually, obviously, to try and share different case studies and use cases of environmental data analysis and sort of front-end dashboard design, largely using Power BI. So our mission really is to share case studies, allow people to learn new tips and tricks, and really empower all Enviros on whether it be their Power BI journey or just the data journey that we're all sort of delving into and learning as we go through. So just general sort of housekeeping in relation to the session and team. So please, just as a courtesy to our speaker, try and make sure you mute yourself when not speaking. With today's session in relation to questions and chat, I think, Matt, you said just we'll have an opportunity at the end of your presentation. Is that correct? Yeah, cool.
I think so. We'll just, it's going to be about 35 minutes, but I think to keep it on time, we'll just keep the questions until the end. Yep.
Perfect. Yep. You can, if you want though, like just write some questions in the chat and I'll just keep that log and record. Otherwise, yeah, just keep it to yourself and there'll be opportunities for that like interactive Q&A at the end. That sounds really good. As a reminder, session is being recorded. So we'll share it afterwards via the YouTube channel, the recording, and also the Meetup group. And yeah, just standard Teams tip. If you want to sort of zoom into different content, you can hold control and scroll through. Just acknowledgement of country, sort of the traditional owners. So acknowledge the Bibbulmun people as the traditional owners in the land on which I'm dialing in from today, based out in Perth near Fremantle. Pay my respects to the Whadjuk people and their elders, both past and present. And it's just a view off the coast of Rottnest Island or Wajimub off the Perth coast. Also with that sort of theme, a lot of people would know we're currently in NAIDOC week. It's an opportunity for a week-long, focused celebrations with the ability to celebrate and recognise the, important history, culture, and achievements of both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across, Australia. It really is a great opportunity and, obviously very topical over the past few years in relation to, the vote yes and referendum. And I think it is very, very important for, people, especially this next generation coming through, to have that opportunity to learn about First Nations. So just wanted to let people know that NAIDOC week is happening right now. If you're interested in seeing what activities and opportunities there are, then you can sort of visit the link. But yeah. Discovery Eye, the company that we run, sort of mainly focused around Power BI, but we put on these meetup events every month. This is just some of the work that we do and the sort of areas that we operate in. If you're interested in more information. Today's session. So Matt, really excited to have you presenting. Thanks very much for putting up your hand. So it's titled AI Not Excel, using ChatGPT for environmental data analysis. And in this session, I'll just rattle off a few things, Matt.
Yeah, sure.
So Matt will showcase some of the practical AI use cases developed for environmental data using ChatGPT, drawing from his own experience, as well as brainstorming and workshopping with his peers. So the examples more illustrate the potential of AI as this valuable part of data exploration and automation that you can build into your toolkit as you build up your skills. With the ability to save lots of time and reduce, the possible manual errors and data input errors that we commonly do find, working in tools such as Excel that we're all very, very familiar with. So in relation to Matt, just by ways of introduction, he's a freelance environmental consultant, as I've just learned, based out of East Gippsland. So welcome, mate. His experience freelance environmental consulting, I think I saw Matt like over 6 years experience as a environmental consultant doing your own thing, which is great. Strong background in hydrogeology, contaminated land assessment, remediation, aquatic ecotoxicology, and hydrographics. Really strong focus and interest in leveraging technology, which, as we all know, is growing rapidly, exponentially changing in terms of what is possible and what tools we have available. So it's environmental mixed with data is like a fantastic combination and integration that's so important in sort of the work that we all do. And I guess lately, Matt, really interested in the AI side of things to help streamline these everyday tasks, which I presume is a lot of what you'll be guiding us through in today's session. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it's just it's a working methodology that I've personally developed. Yeah.
Awesome. These are just a couple of little screen grabs I grabbed from that wicked little GIF video that you posted on LinkedIn earlier in the week. So thanks very much for that. Look, mate, that's it from me. I'll stop sharing now if you wanted to pull up your screen, and then yeah, feel free to take it away. Thanks.
All right. So just sing out, Christian, if there's anything looks all right, because I'm going to be jumping between screens a bit. So if it looks like something's missing, just let me know.
Yes,
So I'm just sharing my screen. All right, that's great. Well, I don't need to do an introduction, which is good. So I'll just jump straight in. So what I'm going to go through today is screen. The presentation is going to go for about 35 minutes, and then, like Christian said, I'll just take some questions at the end. So I'm going to go through how data analysis with ChatGPT works, and including some of the sort of the background, the stuff going on in the background, which is going to help you to interact with it. And as described, I'm looking at Excel pain points. So I've been out asking people in the industry and my peers what annoys them when using Excel. I'm not bashing on Excel, it's just that that's the most common bit of the application that I see people using in environmental consulting. So I've decided to try and look at some pain points using Excel. So I just want to thank Leon, and I want to thank Mark and Yingfan and Bryant and all the people who have made time to tell me about their pain points in their work to help guide this presentation. So then I'm going to go and look at solutions to those Excel pain points, and I'm going to go through 4 examples on what those solutions are. And then the end point of this presentation is to end up at automations. So these are the key things which are going to save you time when you're doing them. So I think to start with, I'm just going to take the risk of doing a live demo. And so what I'm going to do is just show you, this is the ChatGPT interface. And normally you would just launch your chats here, and it starts with a blank chat where you can jump in and start a conversation. But this doesn't have any, when you launch this initial chat view, it doesn't have any context. It doesn't know what you want. You have to work through a conversation to solve a problem. So what we're getting to at the end of this presentation is automations, and those automations come in the form of GPT. So you can see that instead of launching a blank chat, I've got all these other things with different icons, and these are all custom versions of ChatGPT which I've developed, which performs they solve a specific problem. So I'm just going to launch a simple one as an example. So this is a custom version of ChatGPT which I've developed, which knows how to transform data for the use of time series data analysis. So I'm just going to find a file and I can show you how it would work. So I drop my file in there. And so this version of ChatGPT already knows what to do because I've preloaded it with that knowledge. I've preloaded it with the context. So I've loaded in a file here which has got all sorts of problems. It's got mixed date time formats. It's missing headers. It's got blank rows. It's got duplicates. All problematic stuff, which I couldn't just jump straight in and do. Produce time series graphs with. So you can see this little analyzing box which has popped up, and I'm going to go through that in a sec. So it's transformed the data, and now it's giving me something which looks much cleaner, and now I can go away and use it for time series data analysis. So just to give you some context, that file was about 10,000 lines. So that's roughly about the period. It'll give you an idea of how long it takes to run this information. So then I can grab that file and download it, and it's nice and prepared for my next task. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much into how large language models work. There's a lot of it in the media and things like that. You can go out and find information out yourself, other than to say that they're prediction machines, and they provide the most probable results. So in this case, when I say twinkle, twinkle, little, it uses its extensive training data to predict what the next word is. So that's a very, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is a very common song, so it would have lots of that in its training data. Where it runs into problems, and I'll just go back if I launch another chat, is that if I put something in there which is unlikely to be in its training data, like if I make up some poetry which is like let's see, a beach, eating a peach. Well, I look at the ocean. I was actually thinking the sunset, but how could it possibly know that? Because it doesn't have my poetry in its training data. So that's just something to keep in mind. And it's not just giving you the most probable result, it's giving you the most helpful result. So these models are designed to be helpful. And that's why sometimes it'll seem like it's providing a correct answer when it actually isn't, because it's trying to be helpful. So before, when I uploaded my file, I pointed out that little analyzing box. And I'm just going to go a bit into what's happening there when it's actually analysing, because it's important in understanding how to work with ChatGPT. So this is how it works. You explain your problem. So you upload your file. And you might say something like, help me, I'm drowning in data. Not a particularly good prompt, but it's an example. And then what happens is that ChatGPT, while that little analysing box comes up, it's actually writing a program in order to solve that problem. And it's using the Python programming language. So this next part is the most important part, I think, and is what makes ChatGPT useful, is that it runs the program and it gives you an answer all within the chat. So what that means is that you don't have to install Python onto your computer, which you would normally have to do. You don't need to set up a notebook environment to execute the code. You don't need to get permissions from IT if you're in a big corporate in terms of getting it all working and navigating all those issues. This all happens within the chat. And why that is powerful is because it allows you to iterate. And so iteration is the most useful thing of working with ChatGPT with data. So you can go back to the start and say, no, that answer is not correct, but what do you think about this? And you can go through this rapid iteration process or a conversation. So when people talk about, you might have heard the term prompt engineering, what they're really talking about is having conversations with a large language model. So the other thing about understanding that it's working with Python is that it gives you access to libraries. So for those of you who don't program, I like to think of programming libraries as like Lego kits. So the code is like a big box of Lego, and you can build anything with it. It's only limited by your imagination, but it's a lot easier to build things if you have kits. So if you have the Lego kit for the truck or the Lego kit for the boat or whatever. So it's for a specific purpose. And so a library or a Python library is like those kind of Lego kits. So it gives you the power of those two when you're working with ChatGPT. So in the table there, I've just got 3 examples of some of the most common libraries there and just a description of the sort of things which they can do. Okay, so I found out of all the people that I spoke to about Excel pain points, I sort of tried to consolidate them down into a few examples that everyone seems to have problems with. And the first one was cleaning and transforming data. That seems to take a fair bit of time. The second pain point was merging of data. So for example, if you're working with hydrographic data, groundwater or stream gauge data, and you want to combine it with something like the Bureau of Meteorology rainfall data, you're working with 2 different types of timestamps, you're working with different sampling intervals and stuff like that. So merging data can be a bit of a problem. Exploring data visually is a bit limiting in Excel. And getting consistent formats or graph formats and exports in large volumes. So if you need to export, 30, 40, 50 graphs more. Okay, so I'm going to go to my first example. So essentially what I'm showing you here is a methodology to help you get to that process where you can automate this. But this is where you need to start. And you need to start with a conversation. So there's a bit of advice from our little friend down here where it says conversations solve problems. So just remember that when you're working with ChatGPT, if you're not having a conversation, you're not solving problems. So don't use it like Google where it's like, do this, and then it gives you an answer and you're like, oh, that answer's garbage. But, this is no good. So you need to have conversations. So this is an example of where I'd start of a conversation which I've pre-saved and essentially how you work your way through this process. So what I've first of all done is uploaded my data, and I'm just going to explain why you can't see the data there. And this is the first limitation of a ChatGPT, is that when you're working with data, the environment that you're developing and running the Python code and working through your problem, it's ephemeral. So it's only there for a few hours. So you need to, at this stage, you need to prepare to solve your problem in one chat within a few hours. I'm going to show you a way to get around that and towards the end of this chat and demonstration that I'm showing you. So I've uploaded my file, and that file is that processed data file which I showed you in the first example, which was the groundwater level data, which has been transformed and made all nice. And I've started off with a prompt. which is I have a data set related to groundwater levels and I need to clean and transform it to be suitable for producing hydrographs. So it's important to tell it why, like what is the endpoint? Give it some context of what the endpoint is. And here, this is using an example, assuming that you're a bit of a novice. So I would say, I don't know what specific issues the data might have. Can you help me identify and fix any problems? So then you're going to read through what it tells you about its own interpretation of the data, and you need to decide whether you agree with that. So you can look through and then it makes some transformations and then it provides the data after it's transformed it, and then you can check that data, go through it, and then make sure that you agree with what it's done. So you're going to see that in the methodologies that I'm providing, there's going to be these checkpoints all through. So you always have to be checking. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to get a good result. So we'll keep moving through the conversation and I'll ask it to provide it as a CSV so that I can, that's another checkpoint. I'm checking the CSV file to make sure that I'm happy with what it's done. Then I'll just double check with it. I say, can you confirm that the data set is now clean and suitable for hydrograph production? Are there any other adjustments needed? I go through and review what it says about that. And then I'm happy with the data now. So, but actually I want to check it visually too. So I'll ask it to create hydrographs for each well. So this is a third checkpoint as I'm working my way through the data. It brings up all the hydrographs. And so the assumption here is that I actually understand my site. So if you're giving this, if you're getting someone to work with ChatGPT and they don't know the site and they're not familiar with it and they don't know their data, I think it kind of has fairly limited value. But for someone who does have experience and knows their data, then it's got a lot of value. So I go through here, I check it. I'm like, okay, these all look fine to me. I'm aware that there's sensor issues and all that sort of stuff. So I know that's not ChatGPT. So you check every graph. And then I'm happy with that. So I'm like, that all looks fine to me. So I'm happy with the data. Please provide the CSV. And that's the end of this process. So what we have to deal with now is the fact that this session is going to time out. And so if we want to do this again, what do we do? So we want to prepare and summarize this entire conversation into something that we can use again to make it happen more quickly. So I would use something like a prompt which says, I want to be able to conduct this process again here in ChatGPT using the original data I provided. Please provide a prompt that I would use when uploading data again and provide some example code that will allow me to conduct this process again. And then it gives me a prompt and then it gives me example code. And the reason I'm asking for example code, and it's actually irrelevant whether you understand it too much or not, the code itself, is that you've got an example to give it in the future. So providing examples to ChatGPT when you want it to do something is hugely powerful. And you can provide good examples of something which is what you want, but you can provide bad examples too and say, don't do this, here's an example. And the other thing too is that this allows you to start creating your own catalog. So I encourage you from the very beginning to make a little folder structure, even if it's just something like this that I'm using for this presentation, and record each problem you're trying to solve. And in that folder, record the URL of the chat, so that you can go back to it because they can get lost easily in this interface. And then you would save the whole chat, and then you would save the prompt that you've generated at the end, and then the example code as well. So you start to build up your toolkit as you go. So I didn't do this when I first started working with ChatGPT, and it was a nightmare. So if you can do this from the beginning, you would save yourself so much trouble. All right, so that was the first example. I'll move on to the next one. So the next example is merging data, and the advice here is step by step. And the reason our little friend's saying step by step is because when you're starting to work with multiple files, I would avoid throwing all the files at ChatGPT at once. You'll have a much better result if you work your way methodically through, and I'll show you a demonstration of how to do that. So we've got, again, I've uploaded the clean groundwater level data that we started with, and it's not there because of that timeout issue. So I've started with inspect and describe this data. And this is something I'll typically start with always, because when I'm working with data, I want to make sure that ChatGPT understands the data in the same way that I do. So you're seeing that you're on the same page. So it goes through, it gives me an example of the data and describes it. And because of my expertise in using ChatGPT, I've picked up something, and I'm not convinced that the data set is actually sorted properly in the date column. So I pick that up and I say, check that the data set is sorted by the date column properly. If it is not, then check into that. And then it provides me with the sorted data set again. So then we keep moving through and checking. And then what I'll do is that before I start even thinking about introducing another data file, I'll view the particular wells that I'm interested in. So I'll get it to show the hydrograph for wells 11 and 2. These are the two which I want to plot against rainfall data. So that's just making sure that it all looks correct. Again, here's another check process. Then I'll look into uploading the next file once I'm happy that that's displaying the first file properly, which is the ground model level data. So I upload the Bureau of Meteorology file. I say, I think this is Flemington Racecourse, this particular one. And I just say, I would like to add some rainfall data to the graph, but first I would like you to inspect and describe this rainfall data I've attached. So again, I'm checking that it understands the data as I do. And then it gives me a sample of the data. And you can see why it's problematic, because it's got the year, month and day format all in different columns. So that would take a bit of time previously if you did it in Excel. And then I want it to show me the rainfall data between 2012 and 2024, which is the period that I'm interested in. And the reason I'm getting it to just plot it on its own is so that I can look at the rainfall data in an unmerged state before it combines it with the other file, so that I can have a reference to check back on. Okay, so now I ask it to add rainfall to the hydrograph, and it brings it up. And now I've got two graphs prior, which I can go back to check. So I can check the rainfall graph to check that it all looks good. And then I can go back and check the ground water level graphs to make sure that that looks sensible as well. And then I make some axes adjustments here. And now I'm starting to get towards something I'm quite happy with. So again, I've reached the conclusion of the problem I'm trying to solve, and I'm using a similar prompt as last time. I want to be able to conduct this process again using the original data. Please provide a prompt and some example code that will allow me to conduct this process again and produce the same output. So again, grab your URL, save that into your folder, save your chat, save this prompt, and then save your example. And that gives you something to go back to either automate or to solve this problem again much quicker. Okay, so the next example, and this is my favorite actually, is interacting with data. So ChatGPT has limited functionality in terms of having interaction within the chat, and I haven't figured out how to do it much other than it does provide basic graphs which you can hover over and it will bring up some of the data points and stuff like that, but it's not very interactive. If there's anyone out there who knows how to do that, please let me know at the end of the presentation. But the way that I have found out how to kind of get it interactive is that I use the Plotly library. So that's one of the libraries I was talking about before in the libraries slide. And I use Plotly to generate these HTML files, and you can interact with those files. So I'll just show you how I go about that. So here's the chat. I've uploaded my ground water level data. Again, I've said inspect and describe this data. So you want to develop your own little process of this repetitive process that you do to just go through and really make sure that you understand the data in the same way as ChatGPT does. Provides an example. Okay, so I'm happy with the data. So then I give it a prompt. I want to use Plotly to produce a HTML dashboard, which I can download. Before you try to produce this, are there any issues with the data that might cause problems producing an interactive time series dashboard? So I'm giving it specific instructions on what I'm using it for, what I'm using the data for, so that I can identify if there's any issues with the data for that particular export. So then it goes through, it gives me a run through of any recommendations that it makes in terms of what it needs to do with the data. And I go through this. So you can see it's quite detailed, but based on my experience, I'm only interested in it focusing on the date format. I only want it to make a transformation based on that. Then it sorts the data, and then it provides the Plotly dashboard. So I'll show you what this one looks like. So once it's downloaded, it's an interactive dashboard where you can interact with the different locations that you've got in your file, and you can zoom in, and it's useful because it gives you a look at your data overall, and then it allows you to make some decisions about, if you want to produce your static graphs for export, what the axes ranges should be for the batch exports and what your x-axes should be and stuff like that. But Plotly is very versatile, so you can do all sorts of different interactive stuff by generating HTML files. And here's one example for tide data, where you can have interactions by changing the moving average if you want to interact with some data like this. Then I've got like a Swiss Army knife dashboard where it actually shows multiple things. So it's a tool to allow you to explore your data. And yeah, just starting to make some decisions about it. So here you've got time series data for that tide data, which you can interact with. It's got descriptive statistics. It's got distribution analysis, correlation analysis, and a basic anomaly detection as well. And it shows you all the anomalies in the anomalies table. And this next one, which is my favorite, which I think Christian put up a picture of, was the 3D contaminant distribution model. So this one, the cool thing about ChatGPT is that I didn't actually have like data for this, so I just got ChatGPT to generate the data. I told it what the context was. I said, this is an excavation. We've taken soil samples down to a depth of 8 meters. So I described what kind of data that I needed in order to create this example. So this kind of tool might be a specific contaminant, and it shows a heat map of the distribution. And then you can work your way down the depth as well to see what the distribution is at different depths. You can save this out as like an MP4 as well, so you can actually have like an animated video, and then you can interact with it too. So the axes on these are just meters that I came up with, so it's like meters depth, meters by meters. So yeah, really versatile library. So that gives you an idea of why it's useful having access to those libraries. Okay. So because large language models give you the most probable output or answer to your questions, it creates problems for having things which are consistent. So one of the frustrating things I found early on was I'd generate a graph and then I'd do it again and it was different, and then I'd do it again and it was different, and then I'd do it again and it was different. So it was really quite frustrating. So this is coming back to using examples, and this is one way of getting around that. And that's why I've collected examples as I've gone through the demonstrations which I've shown you so far. So I'll jump into this chat. All right. So in this case, we're starting again with our clean groundwater data, and I'm asking it to inspect and describe it. Same process, it goes through. We're making sure we understand we're on the same page. And then I've gone to the point where I want to check the data again. So I want to show 3 example hydrographs showing groundwater levels by measurement method. And I get this example. But there's something a bit strange in there. These sort of disconnected lines running all over the place are a bit indicative of date sorting problems. So that's something I identified earlier. So then I ask it to check the date column just to make sure that it's dealt with it properly. Then I get it to sort the dates to correct that problem, and then I generate the hydrographs again, and you can see that those lines going back and forth have disappeared. And I get it to show me the graphs separately. This is an example of that sort of limited interactive function that it gives you, but it gives you some measurements information on the data, but you can't really zoom in or anything like that. But you can toggle between the static graphs and the interactive graphs too. But I expect that interactive functionality to improve over the coming months. Okay, so we've gone through, looked at that. So it's still not really giving me what I want in terms of the way that it's formatted. So I've actually gone back and to a previous report or something like that, and I've just pulled out a PNG example, and I've just uploaded the PNG into the chat, and I'm like, here's an example. Can you make it look more like this? So then we start working through the process of, that brings it up again. It gets pretty close on the first attempt in terms of the formatting, but just some of the font sizes and stuff are not quite the same. So I just keep working through this, and you'll see that it's quite a long conversation as I go through trying to get to something which I'm happy with. And so you do need to invest that time to get your templates sorted so that you can get or to match your style guide or your report style guide or your color scheme or whatever you're using for your company. So I keep going through. And then I eventually get to something at the end that I'm happy with here. So I'm happy with this final product where I've got my legend looks okay, the colors look okay, and I'm happy with the style of this graph. So again, once you've done that, then you ask it to summarize the whole conversation just like before, and then you save all the different things I've spoken about previously, the URL, the chat, and the example prompt and the example code so that you can use it again. And just to give you an idea of what how much quicker it will be once you've got your example that you've just generated at the end and the example prompt and code, here's what it looks like if I do it again. So I've just uploaded my data and I've literally just pasted in the prompt and the example detailed code. And it's just jumped in and produced those graphs straight away. And now I've got something which looks exactly how I want it. So that's how to get something which is repeatable. It's just getting really solid examples to show it. And then it makes those processes again. So that all feeds into the automation side of things. So we use all those prompts and examples that we've saved to build our automations down the track. And that's in the form of custom GPTs or assistants. The main difference being that custom GPTs are inside ChatGPT, but you can actually build assistants using the API outside of ChatGPT, which connects into ChatGPT, but you can still get access to the Python environment that it uses to do all this analysis. And then you can work towards actually much more complicated GPTs and that solve problems more complicated than that basic one, which I showed you to begin with, which was just a data transformer. So here's an example of a GPT which I built, which goes through a process and guides you to reach an outcome or to solve a problem. So you're part of the process. So here you've got ChatGPT and the user, which is you. So you would upload your file. ChatGPT would transform the data, and then it would prompt you to inspect the data and provide instructions on formatting the graphs. And then ChatGPT would generate the graphs, and then it would ask for permission for approval. So it would prompt you to go through and do all the checks that I've described. So you can see here, I'm embedding this checking process within the tool. Then once everything's approved and you're happy with it, then ChatGPT generates a Word doc. It inserts all the graphs into the document and then provides a summary of the data for you. So to show you what that looks like, I'll just go to the conversation. So first I'll show you what I mean or how you build a GPT. So if I go to edit function, this is the back end of the GPT, and this is where you put all that information that you've saved from all those other processes that we've been through, or all those other examples. So you create a name for it, you create a description for the GPT, and then in this instructions part, this is where you put all those different steps, and I've chained them all together. So step 1, data inspection. So this is where the transformation happens, and I've used the example prompt that I generated from the first example to put in here. I've provided an example of the code. And then I've moved on to another step, which is save a dashboard as a HTML file. So the GPT actually gives you the dashboard so that you can look at your data raw, as well as having the dashboard to assist you to make decisions about the next step, which is formatting, access range specification. I've put some other stuff in here too in another step where I've actually given it baseline values for all the wells that it can refer to and insert into the graphs if you give it approval. So you can see we've got quite a complicated series of steps here that you can work towards. And then the last step is create a summary document. And you can see here after it as well, I've given it even more examples, which gives it an example interaction of how someone might interact with the GPT. So you can see how I'm really embedding examples as much as I can. Okay, so I might jump back and run this again. So this is what the conversation looks like when you launch the GPT. So I upload my data and then it jumps straight to step 1, which is the data inspection. And it goes through and makes transformations, and then it guides itself to step 2, data preparation and Plotly dashboard. So it gives me the Plotly dashboard so I can download it to help me through the rest of the process. Step 3, I use the Plotly dashboard to help me define my axes ranges, and then I give it some instructions on that. Interestingly here, I've made a mistake where I've said x-axis 2016 to 2014, and it picks up on that and says, why would you make it backwards? And so I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Make it 2016 to 2024. And then it generates the hydrographs and asks me if I want any of these baselines included. And then I say, no, they're fine as they are. I don't need to make any changes to those baselines. And then it generates the graphs and provides them to me in the chat so that I can inspect them and approve the graphs. So I go through and look at them all. I actually don't approve these because it's missing some data. So I actually say, where's the rest of the data? And then it revises them again. So this is where it's really important for you just to have knowledge of your own site to be able to pick up on these things if mistakes do happen. So it generates all those, and I'm happy with those. I say the graphs are fine, and then it moves on to step 6. It generates the PNGs. And then the very last step, it creates a summary document, and I'll show you what that document looks like, and it provides a download link. And this is your end result. So you get a Word doc that's formatted in a certain way, it embeds the graphs for you, and I've also instructed it to provide a summary, a basic summary of the data, giving some of the basic stats that I need for a report. And then you can take that away and continue it to finish that report for whatever you're working on. So I'll just go over a couple of positives and negatives of like using this tool, and that's, I think the ephemeral disk space is the biggest frustration because you have to go through and you can't just go back to a chat and keep working with it. So that's quite frustrating. I'm hoping they'll deal with that, that they'll solve that problem at some stage. It can be hard at first to get consistent and accurate outputs. So, but I think if you follow that process which I've given you, it will really help because yeah, that can be a very frustrating thing. And that's just because of the nature of the way large language models work. And there's still periods where there is downtime or slow speed. So obviously it's still in a research and development phase. Like these are still research and development companies that have these products. So there's a lot of demand on the system. It's getting better, but yeah, there is still times where it'll freeze up or it won't work or there'll be some downtime. So I think in terms of the positives, like I really do think there's significant opportunity to save time and to make processes better. And I guess that results in a competitive advantage. And the technology is exponentially improving so fast that I've tended to try to design things which don't work now, but I expect that they will in 3 months. So I'm working towards making much more complicated report automations, which don't work now, but I think they will in 6 months. So I think this is where having that innovation investment mindset can really help. You have the potential to build some really cool stuff, which you can just pick up and run with in the future. But I just want to touch on too, like everyone wants to save time, but there is a genuine opportunity to actually improve the quality of your work, not just time. So some of the stuff I do, it really doesn't save any time whatsoever, but I'm able to get better exports and better formatted graphs and stuff like that. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. So I think it's just worth saying this is just my experience. One thing that I've found is that everyone has their own different way of using large language models, and we're in this phase at the moment of just figuring it out and seeing what they can do. So if you've got questions or if you've got ways in which you've used it or ways which I'm not doing it right and you've got a better idea or something like that, yeah, let's just jump in and we can have a chat about it.
Thanks, Matt. That was fantastic. Like awesome examples, obviously super relevant to this group and like everyone that's on the call. And mate, that's sort of the most advanced like use cases I've seen of using ChatGPT. So thanks very much for your time and like preparing that information. We do have a few questions. Is it okay if we sort of run through them now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just go off the chat that was sort of being populated as we went. So first question is, was that a free version of ChatGPT or is there some sort of licensing subscription required?
No, so I use ChatGPT Team. And so I think There's only really two versions I think you should be using for anything with sensitive data, and that's ChatGPT Team, which can give you like up to 150 people to be part of the team,
Yep.
or ChatGPT Enterprise, which is for larger organizations, which is 150 people and more. So no, I wasn't using the free version. I'm using a version of it that has SOC2 compliant security, which is very similar to ChatGPT Enterprise as well.
Yep. And rough order of magnitude of costs for that, like for maintaining that license, do you know?
I think Team is about $25 a month per seat. So
Yep.
you have to buy two seats up front.
Yep.
So I've got a Team. But I had to buy two seats.
Yeah.
And then so that's good up to 150. I think it's $25. Up to 150. I don't think you get discounts if you have more. But there is options for education discounts, and they give not-for-profit discounts as well, which I think are $20 a seat.
Cool.
Enterprise, I think Enterprise is more something you have to negotiate with ChatGPT, but I think unless you've got more than 1,000 licenses, I think it's actually more expensive. I think it's, I don't know, $60 a month per seat, something like that. Yeah, but that's something you would negotiate with OpenAI.
Cool. It's good to know. And I think there was another question a bit later on from Mark saying his company has sort of concerns with the security of ChatGPT. So what you're saying, Matt, is that if you have either the enterprise or the ChatGPT team, then it's wrapped up in its own security for those individual users, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you have to do if you're going to start working with AI is really nut down your acceptable use policy. And that's going to be different. That's going to be different for each company. So what you need to do is get together and decide what that is, or get some help to make that acceptable use policy. And then look, and you can get they're called security white papers. So you can get the security white paper for ChatGPT Team or Enterprise, and then look whether that aligns with your own acceptable use policy.
Sure. No. And I think for most people on the call, in terms of if you're working for bigger organizations, obviously it's important to know what's capable and what these licenses are, so you can have those conversations with your IT team if you're not part of that IT team, and so that can be managed then at a larger scale, rather than you being an individual user and saying, okay, I want to use this for X use cases. That's perfect. Thanks for explaining that, Matt.
Okay.
Another question is, again, from Mark, how do you take someone else's merge cells and clean them up? So I think he's talking about when you inherit the data set, what are the first steps you take to grasp the key ideas and go through that process?
First of all, you need to decide what you want to do with it. So what is your goal with the data? And so it's about, there's a sort of a format which you can work through, which is when you're asking ChatGPT to do something, first of all, you want to start with instructions, and then you want to give it information about and so the more general your prompts are, the more general the answer. So the more detailed your prompts are, the more detailed the answer. So if you work through instructions, information, examples is the next step. So you provide as many examples as you can. So if you're working with data that you have other examples of that's kind of similar, you can do that, and then format. So giving instructions what the output is. So it's really just getting really tight about understanding what are you doing. So make sure just like you would with a person when you're trying to solve a problem, you just want to be very clear about what the end goal is.
Yep. No, I think that's really good points. So very stepwise, process-based in terms of the way you approach it. Yeah, that's cool. Question, could you please once more quickly run through the process you go through for extracting the prompts and the code you create to generate the same outputs at a later date? Do you want to just run through that again quickly?
Yeah, let me just find a window to bring up. Sorry, just give me 2 secs.
It's all good. And while Matt's bringing that up, a few questions in the chat about recordings being made available. I'll share that information at the end. It'll just be on the Discovery Eye blog site through our YouTube channel as well. So I'll give all the links to that at the end.
Okay, so here's an example from before. Can you see that, Christian? All right.
Yeah, that's just popped up.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
All right, so this is an example here. So I want to be able to recreate or reproduce this exact style and format of graph using the original data I provided. Please produce a detailed prompt and example code that I can use to reproduce the graphs in future. So these prompts are not like, there might be better ways to write these things. So you can experiment with it too, just to give it. And like I said, this is an iteration process, and you can actually just take that prompt and give it to ChatGPT and explain what you're trying to do and say, can you improve this prompt? So you can feed back your instructions and prompts back in the ChatGPT to try and improve them and make them more clear.
Awesome. Thanks for saying. When you started doing the prompts, like you personally, were you asking for the code first up? Because I think that's an important step to give it that, like, validation component of what you actually need.
I didn't start. I only figured using the code further down the track.
Okay, later on.
It's the example. So yeah, there's a lot of good. I just did a bunch of courses on Coursera. So they've got like a Gen AI specialization. So I just worked through. If you go to my LinkedIn, you can see the exact courses that I've done. I've posted them there, so you can actually go and find those courses yourself. One of the leaders of Gen AI sort of implementation and advice is Vanderbilt University in the US. So they've got a Gen AI center. And so you can get lots of information from there. So I think it's just a case of like seeing what other people are doing and, try and see what other people are doing and just so you don't get stuck, because it can get quite frustrating if you're just trying to figure it out from the very beginning.
And I think, that's a great point. And I think from a lot of the comments in chat and people reacting to your presentation, seeing these use cases are like that eye-opening moments about, okay, we're doing these are pain points that we're all experiencing. And I think it's great you sought feedback from people on the call in terms of what are their challenges with Excel and how can we try and streamline and automate that using this new tool. So it's a really good point. I like you're talking about the future as well, what the future of this tool looks like and sort of planning for that. That's obviously a great idea too.
So and just touching on that, there's another model called Claude. I think it's Claude Sonnet 3.5. Nearby, one of OpenAI's competitors, and the company is called Anthropic. So they've just released a version of this of their large language model that can do this sort of work as well. It's not as good yet, but where I think this technology is going is you'll have all of that interactive dashboarding environment in the chat. It'll be very sophisticated. You'll be able to connect it to your database, and you can already do that. I haven't spoken about that in terms of how you set up your GPTs. You can make an API call to a database, and then integrate that into your GPT. But it's where I see it going.
Yeah, there are a few more we've keep working through.
That's fine.
Because you just touched on Claude and sort of the alternate other LLMs that are out there. So a question was, can you do similar things with Microsoft Copilot? Like, have you had experience with Copilot and tried to do sort of similar analysis?
I haven't. So Copilot allows you to use Python in Excel. I have not used it. I've done a course on Coursera on Copilot, and it goes into a bit of using Python in Copilot, but I haven't used it myself to see how good it is. The only feedback I've got is from other people who have been involved in pilot trials who said it's a bit hit and miss.
Fair enough. Cool. I know we're seeing Copilot sneak into a lot of these Microsoft products that we all sort of use. I know the last few months it's come into Power BI, but you do have to also be considerate of, I think there's additional license fees on top of that. So just always be understanding of what you're getting yourself into, and what those other features are. So another question we have, you talked about understanding your site a lot, so making sure that you aren't getting inaccurate or logical outputs. So had you personally gained experience, and how has different work opportunities help you build a bigger picture perspective for if you encountered a colleague who was talking with you about a completely new hydrograph site with some wells? So if you can see that question as well.
I don't. You have to have some familiarity with and you have to use your own creativity to integrate your own checking processes. And I don't know the answer to that for every individual, example or site, but you just need to think. You need to think about, how am I going to integrate these check processes in from the beginning? Yeah, look, I can't get too much more specific than that because the examples that I'm working with, I'm like, okay, well, this is the checking processes I've integrated for this particular problem.
Yep.
So, but what I would recommend is just thinking about mapping out, how are we actually going to validate this,
Yep.
which you
And I
would do
think,
anyway. I mean, I've seen plenty of mistakes happen in using other stuff like Excel too. You still need to do it, or if you get it from a colleague, you've got to find a way to check it.
yep.
Um, yeah,
And
so you
same
need to
as
do this.
same as Power BI, like your DAX counts, what are the outputs, and what sort of context is being applied. Yeah, you always need something to validate it off. And if you're not the domain expert of a particular site, you need to make sure you've got someone there that can give you ticks and or crosses about what the outputs are. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And
Cool.
you might find yourself having to get someone who is for some problems, like someone who understands code a bit better as well. My understanding of Python is quite basic, so sometimes I'll reach out to someone who knows it a lot better, and they can actually check the outputs as well. Just to especially when you start getting into the space of statistical analysis and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
It might just be a who, which you need to find to help you check what you've done.
Cool. And then we've got just one more in the chat so far. I think it's a good one. So Dane says he's recently encountered a frustrating feedback loop with ChatGPT where it repeatedly suggests the same solution that doesn't work for his problem. Have you experienced this issue before? And if so, how did you manage to get around it?
Can I just, if you're on, can I able to turn your microphone on, Dane? What model were you using? Were you using like ChatGPT free version 3.5 or what version?
I'm using the latest one. I've got the paid version, so I'm using ChatGPT 4.0,
Yep.
40 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've experienced the same issue on all of the at some point during trying to solve a coding problem or data solution, it starts just providing the same solution over and over and over. And even when you say, can you just stop? It's just like, okay, and then it just pumps out the same solution that doesn't work.
And
And
what
I
language?
ultimately end up just deleting the chat because it just becomes so frustrating.
And what language was that in? What sort of coding language were you trying to solve problems for?
That was with R and SQL.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that just an example, I haven't used it. I use it to help me write DAX code for my Power BI stuff, and sometimes because there's just not as much of that available in its training data, it's not as good at it. So I found it pretty much next to useless for DAX. I haven't used it recently, but yeah, but that could be part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to the skill, because the skill that you need to learn, I think, or that we're all going to need to learn, is that it's all about having that conversation. So as you build your skill in having that conversation and working your way through a problem, then that's when you can get to the outcome which you want. So I don't know if you put much time into learning, sort of just doing some prompt engineering courses or
yeah, I just
things.
recently signed up to Coursera and working my way through some of the courses on there.
And there on Coursera, there's one which is a little bit out of date now, but that's one of the courses through Vanderbilt University, and it talks about data analysis using Code Interpreter. Code Interpreter is the name that they give to that execution environment in ChatGPT, which uses Python. So that's an old course, but that might answer some of your questions in terms of combining prompts with working specifically with Code Interpreter to help you to solve those problems.
Okay. No, great. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Great questions. Cool. All right. Matt, that's we got one more, but maybe we'll just get to it at the end. I'll just reshare screen just to close out on this session, Matt. And then
Okay, I'll just sharing. Yep.
Cool. So thanks very much again, mate. That was, like I said, based on the attendance, the questions, and obviously the conversations just at the end there. Like I think that was really well received. Like I learned a lot being like a ChatGPT novice myself. So really appreciate you sharing that information with us. So that was great. Thank you. We have our next session set up. Both Alice and I in 15th of August, we're going to take you through a bit of a deep dive back into Power BI space, exploring the DQ, so the New South Wales State Government Flood Recovery Power BI dashboard. This is a publicly available dashboard. It's on the EPA New South Wales website. So if you're interested in learning some of these different techniques, there's an event in the Meetup, so feel free to sign up for that one in just over a month's time. And then lastly, there were a few questions. Where do we watch the recording? So as per each month, we'll make these available probably by the end of the week. We'll try and get the recording and the blog up. And we'll go from there for the August session. If anyone is keen to share what they've been doing, like, again, it doesn't have to be Power BI, as you just saw with Matt's cool example. Feel free to get in touch with me. We're always looking for speakers, and as I said, with the mission, just really trying to share these cool use cases across the environmental space, both within Australia and obviously globally, with people that are dialing in as well. So thanks everyone for your time. I hope you got a lot out of the session today. Again, Matt, as the key speaker and presenter, thank you. Lots of love that was coming through on the chat and like the reactions. So we really appreciate your time in preparing that. And exciting to see where the AI tech stack in general is all sort of moving, and what you can do with it, because I think it's, like you said, it's not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger, stronger, and I think it'll be more and more applied to the sort of work that we all do over the coming months and years for sure. So thanks, Matt. That was great.
Yeah, look, no problem. And look, feel more than free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and if you want me to run other stuff with you, or answer them questions. I love doing all this stuff, so I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Perfect. Is it all right